Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. This episode of the Inspire to Invest podcast has been brought to you by the Multifamily Conference. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast. I have Lindsay Lovell joining us from San Francisco today, so her weather is much sunnier and warmer than mine is at the moment. Now, to give you a little bit of background on Lindsay, she's done a lot in a very short period of time. In just 18 months, she scaled to 36 stores, reaching her goal of financial freedom along the way. And then in just 2 years, focusing on the BRRRR method, short-term rentals, and flips, she actually scaled to 57 long-term rentals, 15 short-term rentals, and she's a limited partner in 2 mobile home park syndications. She also co-founded a company called G6 Capital Management. It's a syndication company with $15 million in assets under management, and Wanderlust Stays, a vacation rental management company. And she also started something called the Millionaires March, which I love because it's focusing on helping other women gain financial independence. So that's a cause close and near and dear to my heart as well. So thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm great. Like you mentioned, a little bit warmer than you are, but really excited to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. So I find it really interesting because you've obviously done a lot in a very, very short period of time. What were you doing before all of this transpired?
Yeah. So, if we go way back, I was hook, line, and sinker bought into that story that we all probably got told growing up. If you work hard enough, get the good grades, you're going to have that American dream. And so I had done that, valedictorian, got the dream job in finance out of school and college, and was still running the rat race.
Yeah.
Went back to school, got my MBA, came out even more in debt and making slightly more money. And I had this moment where I was looking at Wealthfront, which was, helps you determine in theory when you can retire based on how much you're saving. And it was literally, I was trying to eke it towards 63 and a half versus, 64. And I was like, okay, well, as long as I don't live a day past 96 years old, maybe I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is miserable. Why do we work so hard? Right. And then right around that time is when COVID hit and everything came to a standstill, like many people. And my husband was like, you're still getting a paycheck, but you can't be out in the field.
Yeah.
Why don't you look into real estate investing? And that's when I found great podcasts like yours and other communities, started doing some research, and fast forward 2 months after that, I bought my first house long distance, sight unseen, and I was on a roll.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously you did a lot in a very short period of time. Like, how did you actually do that? Because it's not like you probably had money just to like buy them all. So were you joint venturing, seller financing? Like, what was your strategy in order to scale that fast?
Yeah. So exactly to your point, we were really successful with the BRRRR method because we had some, not a large chunk by any means, but we had some money that we could buy a house or two.
Yeah.
And then by being successful to pull out a majority of it,
Yeah.
be able to rinse and repeat. I also did work with hard money lenders.
Yeah.
And I did do joint ventures in my first 10. So there's so many ways to get started, even if you don't have the capital yourself.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned that your husband had suggested that you get into real estate investing. So did he have any background in that, or why did he necessarily suggest that to you?
Yeah, it's so funny you asked that because when we got married, he had rental properties and I just never thought about it. We'd been married for probably about a year at the time into the COVID pandemic. And we just never thought about it as more than just like an asset. We never paid attention to cash flow or anything. But he had a friend who owned, a couple hundred doors in Kansas City, Missouri. And he's like, you remind me of Jason. You should connect with Jason and see if this is something you want to get into and do, more of. And it was funny because after I did have that sort of more investor cash flow mindset, we went back and looked at his portfolio and said, majority of these have to go.
Yeah.
So, you can own real estate, but still really not be savvy and focused in on it. So he sort of just indirectly pointed me in that direction.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, for the career that you were working on it before all of this happened, did you find that you were kind of straddling both sides of the fence for a while? Or like, did you just rip off the Band-Aid and you're like, this is what I'm going to do now? Like, what did that journey look like?
Yeah, no, I absolutely kept the W-2 job because real estate, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, at least in my experience, even though I was able to do a lot in a short period of time. I think if you can, it's very important to keep that W-2 job, to have that security and that safety. And when it comes to getting your finance,
Yeah.
they're going to want to see that, right? So the lender is going to ask. And so I kept that. And the beauty of it is I loved what I did, but it's probably going to be phased out with time, just given the nature of what I do. And I was always worried that I was going to have to find a different career and not be able to retire doing what I do. And now I can continue to do it because I love it. And I'm not worried because if and when it goes away, I don't need to work.
Yeah.
And so it's really just a different light of how I get to see my job now.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, for the portfolio that you have, are they all, like for the long-term rentals, are they all single family homes? And where exactly are they focused? Like, I assume where you live is probably expensive. So I was just curious to see, like, did you build the portfolio there, or is it kind of scattered around the country?
Yeah, it's absolutely, we don't own any rentals in the state we live in. The majority are in the Midwest. I really like the Midwest because of the price point and the growth and stability. So Missouri, we do have some out in North Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee, Colorado, and they range from single family. We just recently spun off an eightplex, which was the largest that we had, but they're all majority single family and some duplexes. But that's really been my sweet spot.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about the price point, what does that look like in some of those places?
Yeah. So the very first house that I bought, now granted, remember you're getting homes that are 100 years plus, so they come with their own set of, costs incorporated with them. But the very first house that I bought in St. Joseph, Missouri, 45 minutes north of Kansas City, Missouri, was $25,000.
Wow.
I put $20,000 of rehab into it.
Check for that where I live. So
right. You can't rent a parking spot out here.
Yeah. They're $100,000 to buy a parking spot in the city here. So it's crazy.
It's insane. Right now, have I had to do some, upkeep and replace the furnace? But the house has withstood 100 years. It's not fallen down anytime soon.
Yeah.
You just have to keep in mind the level of tenant that you're going to get when you're charging that price point and everything, and just, be mindful of that. But again, it's all about running your numbers to kind of take and mitigate any risk associated. But, our sweet spot is anywhere now from, 90,000 to about 200,000 per house.
Now, in terms of scaling that portfolio, since you are fairly dispersed, like, how did you come to choose those markets? Like, did you just find other real estate investors in those areas, realtors, and then just in terms of managing them and stuff like that, do you just have your local property managers, or can you talk a little bit more about how all of that came together?
Yeah. Great question. So I ended up in St. Joseph, Missouri, because exactly like you said, I found another real estate mentor and coach, and that's where he was. And he was just very gracious to say, I'll introduce you to my team there.
Yeah.
And that was great because it allowed me to see who you need as your team and what they do. And then what I've been able to do is find other markets. And again, it's sort of been somebody in my mastermind group is in Enid, Oklahoma, and it sounds great. I have family in Colorado. I want to be able to write off my trips there. And then I build a team, right? I build a team in each of those locations, starting with a rock star real estate agent, finding one that's investor savvy, and then asking them to help me build out my team. And there's been markets I've wanted to go into, but because I couldn't find that great real estate agent partner, I didn't go into them.
And perfect sense.
If you can't find the right team, you shouldn't force it, in my opinion. And then your question about management. So I started off having property management. And for those ones that I mentioned, a lower price point, maybe tenants that need a little more hands-on, maybe a little bit, if I'm going to have an eviction, that's where it's going to happen. I do have a property manager there. As I've grown to be more comfortable, I've hired a full-time virtual assistant. So between her and my husband and just systems you can put in place, we self-manage the majority elsewhere.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I was just curious to see exactly how that was. Now, when you look at just your overall portfolio, is there anything that you would look at as something you're most proud of, or you feel like is your biggest success?
I would just say having been able to diversify and in different markets, because when I first got started, I had people kind of just giving me a really hard time. Like, you're not focused. This is totally not the right way to do it. You should just drill down in one market. I remember one guy that I thought was a really great mentor. He's, older, had done this for years. And I thought, this is what makes me comfortable. It's important to me to diversify, not only in assets, but markets. And to be able to have done that successfully against what, all the experienced investors were telling me, I think makes me most proud. just
Yeah,
going
no,
with
I
my
think that
gut.
makes perfect sense. Like even when I've talked to people about different opportunities and stuff like that and save and they're married, I'm like, just diversify as much as you possibly can because there could be things like the economy impacting a place, there could be jobs coming or going, there could be catastrophic weather events and stuff like that. So if you have your whole portfolio in one place, like that can literally go up in smoke if something big happens, right? So as much as maybe it could be a little bit more complex and more of like a spider web, and maybe people aren't comfortable with that, I just think it's the safest way to protect your assets.
It absolutely, to your point, it can literally go up in smoke, your
Yeah.
entire portfolio, if you have it all in one area.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, in terms of growing your portfolio, would you say there's anything that stands out to you as one of the biggest obstacles that you faced?
Sometimes being a woman could be a big obstacle, and it was as much external as it was internal, and me feeling like I didn't have a right to have a seat at the table.
Yeah,
And sometimes, we're all learning, right? And it can show when we're learning, but we've all been there. And I think an obstacle sometimes being a female, speaking with a contractor who knew I didn't totally know what, the process of drywalling
yeah,
was
yeah,
maybe made me a little bit more susceptible to higher bids or other shenanigans. But
yeah,
it's all stuff that, comes with time, and you learn and you put the right processes in place, and
yeah.
you can mitigate that.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Would you say there's anything that stands out to you as one of the biggest lessons? And with regards to that, if you could go back and do anything differently, like would you have shifted anything now knowing what you know?
So I think one of the biggest things, it's twofold, and again, sort of dealing with contractors and being a female is I'd stop saying I'm sorry for things that weren't my fault.
Yeah.
Because I think that's definitely something we tend to do as females, and especially when we're new in a space,
Yeah.
don't want to feel like we're impeding on somebody, and just remembering I have the right to be here, and using that confident language on the phone and in emails, not just,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just calling to check in. It's I'm checking in, I'm paying
Yeah.
you to do this. What's going on? And
Yeah.
having that confidence. And second, learning to put everything. Handshakes are great, but still have it in writing,
Oh,
have it in a
absolutely.
contract, have it in an email, right? No matter how great this contractor be, have all communication changes written and documented, because you're going to need to go back to it eventually.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I actually ran my own business for 18 years, and it was one of those things like we had clients that'd be like, do I really have to sign this? Or I'm traveling or I'm busy. And it's like, there was obviously lessons learned along the way, and our agreements evolved as things that you never expected to happen, right? But at the end of the day, as long as you have that commitment and that signature, that is your recourse if anything ever happens, right? So couldn't agree more.
Exactly.
But on that note, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
The Multifamily Conference is back, May 24th to 26th at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Get your tickets at multifamilyconference.ca.
Thanks again for following along with this episode of Inspired to Invest. In addition to real estate, investing, and running my own brand experience agency for 18 years, I also published a book called The Accidental Entrepreneur in October of 2021. This is my story, and it chronicles how I turned tragedy into triumph to embrace my destiny in entrepreneurship. If you're interested in picking up a copy, you can find the link at serenahomesrealtor.com, and you can also find my link tree with all of the retailers in the details below. Thanks again for your support.
Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future.
We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Inspired to Invest podcast. I have Lindsay Lovell here joining us from San Francisco, and she's sharing how she scaled her portfolio to a significant number of long-term and short-term rentals, as well as a syndication with a couple of mobile park homes. And she's also launched a capital wealth company. So we're talking about how she managed to do this and all the nitty-gritty details in terms of where her portfolio is. So I guess one of my next questions are, what would you say is the craziest thing that's happened to you so far as a real estate investor?
I would say the craziest thing is I bought my third house from a wholesaler, and I did not realize that I bought my first house from a wholesaler and it was great, all good. I didn't realize that when you buy from a wholesaler, you are literally getting the house and everything as is, and it was a hoarder house.
Oh no.
And so, I'd seen it in the pictures. I don't know why I assumed it was just, going to be taken when the tenants left, the owners left and all this stuff. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I had my crew ready to go over there, and they call me and they're like, Lindsay, we can't even get in the basement door. It's stacked so high.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? And I think just seeing how people live and how business is done very differently here in this world sometimes was probably one of my biggest wake up calls and crazy experiences to get me started.
Yeah, it really is amazing just to see kind of how some people choose to live. It's just something you can't rationalize sometimes, but you just have to deal with it. Now, you obviously alluded to some of the real estate mentors that you've had in different education platforms. Can you talk a bit about what those were like and maybe some of the best advice that you were given along the way?
Yeah. So I think definitely finding a community, because you don't know what you don't know. And even as I've gone along, there were some masterminds that I joined. So I definitely say, if you're not going to work with a coach or a mentor, masterminds are a great, very financially reasonable way to get connected.
Yeah.
And even though I was more advanced in the first mastermind that I was in for a long time, it was so fascinating to me that the beginners still had questions or brought up things that I was like, I didn't know that. I mean, I've been fine doing it all along this way without this resource, but that is really great to know.
Yeah.
And so you're always learning, no matter how experienced you are, and you're going to teach your mentor things. So just have confidence that you're going to get to that point. And the best piece of advice that I got from my mentor was to triangulate. And that was always get 3 opinions, 3 bids, something, because you need that many data points. Real estate is really about the data and the numbers, and it's simple. It's not calculus, but you do want to make sure you have all the variables. And I've been shocked. Actually, I just got a call from one of our COO saying, remember how we got 2 quotes saying to fix the heater, it's going to be several $1,000s.
Yeah.
We just got that 3rd quote, and the guy's like, no, it's just the board. It's going to be $780.
Wow.
Now, if I hadn't gotten that 3rd data point and triangulated,
you would have spent
that would have been a big hit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing just how different things can be. One of the offices that I had for a while, we had a few contractors coming in to do quotes, and they range from 25,000 to 65,000. And I was like, I kind of benchmark what the leasehold improvement budget was in terms of what made sense, but it was amazing to be just that's a very wide span for the exact same work, right? It was just taking down some drywall and drywalling a couple spaces in the back, and I was just floored by all of that. But we had to have a licensed contractor, and we had no choice but to go that route. And I was like, my husband could have done this for 10 grand, but right? You got to do what you got to do, right? So now obviously you've built up a very big portfolio in just kind of a short period of time. What's next for you? Where do you see that growing to? And is there a particular financial freedom number that you have in mind that will make you feel like you've made it or you've arrived?
Yeah. Okay. So that's such a great question, because I'm going to start there, because that really was one I struggled with a lot when I first started, because being very, again, like I said, all about the numbers, trying to figure out what you're going to need, 5, 10, 15 years from now. really gave me a lot of anxiety because I'm like, does it need to be this number? Does it need to be that number? And I had a great mentor that said, for some people, it's about the cash flow.
Yeah.
And for me, being able to replace, I had my number of what, I had my spreadsheet and said, if my husband and I could live the dream lifestyle, take these vacations, have these, car payments, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Our monthly cash flow is this number.
Yeah.
And when we hit that number, I was able to say, I'm financially free. I feel, so for me, it was more, not a overall, worth, but what I was bringing in and could cover each month if both of our jobs disappeared.
Yeah.
And then, so everybody that's, a little bit different, but I would say it's your W-2 plus maybe half of your W-2 and then some.
Yeah.
And then, your next question, now I'm going to totally forget about.
That's okay. Just in terms of what's next. So obviously you built up a lot. Like, do you think that,
oh goodness,
you have an idea to get to a certain number of doors or maybe to go into a different asset class? Like what would be hard for you next?
So the latest venture that we've got into are pivoting some of our homes. Being in short-term rentals, we've seen some of the market shift where we're not permitted.
Yeah.
And so instead of selling them off, we've been turning them into group sober living homes.
Okay.
So we recently opened 8 of those. They're a lot of work, so I do not recommend, just diving in thinking it's passive like long-term or anything. But it's a great way to give back to the community. There's definitely the need, but it's running a little mini business and community and almost hospitality in each house. But that's definitely one that we have a passion for, that I've been really excited to start taking our portfolio in that direction.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the same thing here, that I know some people that have shifted from short-term rentals to mid-term rentals. So they'll be in markets where there's a high volume of medical, like traveling nurses or construction and stuff like that. So they'll do anywhere from 30 days to 6-month leases. So they're getting that premium rent, maybe not as lucrative as a short-term rental, but a lot less complexity and work in terms of getting it fulfilled. So I've seen people pivoting into those strategies kind of closer to home as well.
So smart. Yeah.
You just got to be careful to make sure that you're not using like a regular lease agreement and, just all those things. But yeah, it's just stuff that you wouldn't have thought of maybe once upon a time. So.
Yeah. And to that point, insurance, because we didn't have the right insurance on a short-term rental, having switched it, a pipe broke and none of that furniture was covered.
Yeah.
So to your point, whenever you're switching, make sure you think about all aspects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you obviously talked about just what you want in terms of cash flow and financial freedom and stuff like that. But can you speak to how real estate investing has changed your life as a whole, like in terms of work-life balance and your lifestyle and maybe your just feelings about the future?
Yeah. I had a lot of, like I mentioned, I had a lot of anxiety about the future before. What is my job going to look like? Is it going to be, am I going to have to go back to, to being inside of a cubicle all week? And real estate investing has showed me that there's lots of different types of wealth. And for me, I've realized my happy wealth is freedom and flexibility. And now I have the choice on how to spend my days. I have the choice of, what kind of job, if at all, I want to work in corporate. I can go hiking in the middle of the day. I can go travel and still be making money and managing a team. And so for me, I think that wealth of freedom and flexibility, and it's 100% changed my life. Not only in, the financial aspect, but it's given me more confidence. I've met so many more great people I never would have. So it's really kind of rounded out my life too, in just all aspects.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm part of a mastermind as well and a couple of other communities, and it's just nice to spend time around people that have that same mindset and the same objectives. And it's just different conversations that you're going to have in those kinds of rooms, right?
100%.
So obviously, the name of this podcast is Inspired to Invest. So I like to ask my guests what their most inspirational or motivational quote is and how that kind of impacts them.
Yeah. So I think, biggest one that we often sometimes need came from a book called The Psychology of Money. And it's more recent, but it's one of the hardest skills in life is to remember not to move the goalpost, because I think we sometimes forget to celebrate what we've accomplished.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, to your point, we're in these communities and we see everybody having this many doors and there's always going to be somebody with more. But if we stop moving the goalpost and remember ourselves 3 years ago being impressed at what we've accomplished and that it's a huge accomplishment, I think it just brings so much more fulfillment to life and helps you appreciate everything that you've had and to realize you are accomplishing something more often than you realize.
Yeah. No, I think that that's really important. Now, in terms of how people can find you, what's the easiest and quickest way that they can get a hold of you if they want to learn about your Millionaires March or your capital company or anything like that?
Yep. So you're going to put it in the notes. You can go to millionairesmarchfreestrategysession.com, schedule 30 minutes with me. Love to chat.
Awesome. So like I said, it'll be in the show notes below. And of course, thank you so much for your time here today. And for anyone that is tuning in, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure that you're followed along on social at Inspire to Invest Podcast. And above all else, remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again.
Thank you to the Multifamily Conference for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.